So, we meet again. For my more recent subscribers, there was once a time where the Mega Man series was what I was most known for covering, similar to how Sonic is currently. Things didn't end well and I decided to stop covering Mega Man altogether, until the Mega Man Zero ZX Legacy Collection released in early 2020. After that, I said I would cover more Mega Man stuff, and while this did lead to 5 new videos on the subject, I'd say I didn't honor this promise as much as I would have liked. This being my first proper Mega Man game review since ZX Advent dropped almost 3 years ago. Now, for the long-time subscribers, I'm sure you're asking the question of why the first new Mega Man review is on Mega Man X1 and not a game I haven't done like the classic Mega Man games of the Mega Man Legends series. Well, I still intend to do video series on the classic and Legends games, however I felt revisiting the Mega Man X series would be pretty special since today is October 5th of 2021. Today marks the 5th anniversary of my original review of Mega Man X. It's a pretty special video to me for many reasons, but I've learned to save that sort of discussion for the end. My videos on Mega Man X1, X2, X3, and X4 are all turning 5 years old this year. Half a decade, so I thought the best way to celebrate would be by going back and giving these 4 games the modern day Jay's Reviews treatment. Of course, I'm sure you're wondering about X5 through X8, and to that I'll just say this. I could do those, but I feel more passionate about the first 4 games in the X series. So I decided to make the rest of the X games a Patreon stretch goal. If we reach $400 a month, I will do X5 and onward. The Patreon has a bunch of perks, including a Discord server and your name being in the video, but I'll save that reward for the end of the video, since I think this intro has gone on long enough. Let's discuss the game at hand. The Nintendo Entertainment System from the mid-1980s changed the landscape of what video games were. Before, arcades were the definitive place to play games, while the consoles had these watered-down renditions of games you could play at the arcade. In the 70s and early 80s, the console gaming market was nowhere near the force it is today, ultimately imploding upon itself in 1983, but that's a story for another day. What was great about the first Nintendo, or the NES, is that while technically the games weren't on par with the arcade tech, they had groundbreaking exclusive games on their console like Mario, Zelda, and Metroid, games that changed the landscape in platforming and adventure game design. I bring this up because of the fact that the NES was also the home of Capcom's Mega Man franchise, which was never a Mario-level success, but something a lot of people played, in particular Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3. At the turn of the decade, things got a little more complicated as Sega brought out the Genesis, a console that dwarfed the NES in visual fidelity and sound quality, and alongside that, Nintendo brought out the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES, their own 16-bit console. What makes this era, the early 90s, interesting is that this was the first big console leap in gaming history. I mean, consoles had been around before the NES, obviously, because we just talked about that. But this jump was massive since consumers now had to be on board with the fact that every couple of years the new systems will come out and you have to spend your money on them as the NES is now obsolete. Mario, Zelda, Metroid, they've all moved on to the SNES, and just look at how much more advanced these games were just at a glance. Not to mention the new games offered that showed off the system's increased power. And there were also the new IPs the Sega Genesis was pumping out. Point being, if you liked gaming and didn't have either of these consoles, you were missing out. Something we're all pretty used to by now, but this was the first time it happened. But back on target, the Mega Man series oddly stuck to its NES guns for a while. I mean, they made 6 of these games on the NES. That's way more games than Mario, Metroid, Contra, Castlevania, or any of the other classic NES franchises. Mega Man 6 dropped in November of 1993, when the Japanese release date of the Super Nintendo was 3 years earlier. Clearly, they had to move on at some point, which is exactly what they did. This roundabout history lesson exists so I can say that when they did finally take that leap of bringing Mega Man to the next generation, they went all out. And that's how you get one of my favorite games ever made, Mega Man X. This game is chock full of next generation appeal. First you get that title drop I just showed, but then you get an options menu where you can configure what each of the buttons do and listen to a sound test. It sounds silly to talk about things like that as if it's a big deal in 2021, but in 1993 these were next-gen features. Previous Mega Man games would take you right to a boss selection screen, but in this game the start button takes you to an intro stage. One of the best designed tutorials in any side-scroller I've ever played. Not something you'd think I'd thought if you watched my original video, but I can focus more on why that is in the X2 review. For now, I'll just say this. I get that the sequelitis video from, goddamn, 10 years ago covered everything you need to know about how this level functions as an introduction to the gameplay, but I think it would be a frankly incomplete Mega Man X review to not give the stage its dues. The basic controls are simple enough to get to grips with, it's just that the enemies here are positioned in different points in the sky, and you will learn, if you haven't played Mega Man before, that lining your shots up with the enemies is the key to the combat. I think modern games plopping a control list on the screen is pretty effective in making sure players know how to play the game, but I'll say this, I think there's something really cool about dropping the player in an area like this one where you have to shoot this enemy out of the sky, but doing so will bring this bridge down. The only way out is to use X's ability to climb up walls. Doing so will teach you that you have the ability to climb up walls. This large gap will teach you what the maximum distance for X's jump is. These enemies will show you that the environment can be an active threat, and on that note, the stage is quite the visual spectacle compared to what the series was capable of on the NES with the aforementioned enemies collapsing through roadways and enemies actively destroying them. My favorite part though is the collapsing ground tutorial where these 3 pieces of road will fall shortly after you step on them. One time I got curious about this part in the middle. What would happen if you stepped on the first platform and then jumped to the third? In some games, the piece in the middle would just float in the air, but in this game, it falls even if you didn't step on it because it had no structural support on either side. That's attention to detail. At the end of the stage, you're met with a boss, but weirdly, you can't seem to do any damage against him while he's taking chunks out of your health bar until he just locks you in place. At that point, you're like, how'd I mess that one up? Am I gonna lose a life? And there, you have one of the most iconic video game character introductions of all time. This finally being the moment where we get some context. Zero here tells the player character, Mega Man X, that he'll keep on the lookout for Sigma's trail, while the guy X just got beat by is called Vile. Sigma is the main villain of the game, currently leading a rebellion against humanity. In the meantime, X should take out Sigma's forces, Zero believing X has the ability to be just as strong as him, as the duo part ways for the time being. This is where the intro stage ends and the game begins properly. To establish these characters a little more, when buying the game as a Mega Man fan, I think you'd be forgiven for not knowing right off the bat that this new game is the start of an entirely new franchise. I mean, it's called Mega Man X. The last game was Mega Man 6, but the title screens for each of the Mega Man sequels used Roman numerals, so maybe the Mega Man X game was just jumping 4 games ahead. Who knows? In reality, Mega Man X is a completely separate character from Mega Man. Like I just established, the SNES represented the future of gaming, and I think it's appropriate that games like F-Zero took place in the future. Mega Man X is the exact same way. If you don't mash the start button when the game opens, you're met with this intro scene that comes before the title screen. The first part being a diagnostic on X's systems, followed by a warning that Mega Man X was created to be the first machine fully capable of free thought. X's creator wanted to ensure that the project would go through safely, meaning X would be sealed away to make sure his systems reliably knew right from wrong. A process that would take approximately 30 years. But the creator doesn't have that much time to live. This is then revealed as Dr. Thomas Light, the creator of the original Mega Man. X is then discovered 100 years later by a researcher named Dr. Kane, who was amazed by X to the point where he created an entirely new type of robot called Reploids, free-thinking machines that are based on X's data. But when some Reploids began to commit crimes against humanity, they were labeled Mavericks, and in response, a Reploid police force called the Maverick Hunters was formed. X and Zero being members of it, as Zero is also X's best friend. Zero's backstory is a bit beyond the scope of this video, so it can wait. Sigma was once the leader of the Maverick Hunters, but began his own Maverick Rebellion, convinced that since Reploids were stronger and more capable than humans, they deserved to be the ones on top, getting 8 of his fellow Maverick Hunters to join him. Now, X is going to take the fight directly to Sigma and his followers, setting up the journey. With that backstory alone, you can tell these games had more focus on the story than the Mega Man games preceding it. The developers had to put in a lot of thought in how they were going to reinvent Mega Man for the next generation, and that effort can be seen in the mechanics of the game, the story, but also in the art design. In the NES Mega Man games, you could see the artists getting a better grasp of how to portray different environments with each game. I'd imagine that had something to do with just how many of these games they did, but really, compare the flat backgrounds of Mega Man 1 to what they were able to pull off with Mega Man 6. Crazy to think this was the same console. Mega Man X, of course, blows them all out of the water in terms of how detailed the sprites and animations can be. This game, like I said, just has really good attention to detail. Take this part of Launch Octopus's stage, for example, where jumping in and out of the water will cause a splash effect, and how the weapon Fire Wave doesn't work underwater. The actual character design in the original Mega Man games also got more complex as time went on. I mean, compare the boss roster from Mega Man 1 to the boss roster from Mega Man 6, and you see what I mean. But still, the character design was limited by the NES hardware as the console could only display so many colors at once. Something the design of Mega Man X was clearly not held back by, as his body has a whole host of different colors and segments that translated really well to the sprites. When you're introduced to the stage select screen in Mega Man X, you see there are 8 stages to freely pick from like in the old games, but now there's also a map that shows how each of these stages connect to each other in a physical sense, as well as there being a brief bio on each of the Maverick bosses by showing their names as well as their height and weight. I must say, if Spark Mandrill over here is a whopping 10 feet tall, then this is a pretty big room. But back on subject, these bosses all have a different theme to them than what was in the old games as well. Each classic Mega Man game boss would be something man, like Cut Man, Bomb Man, Wood Man, Snake Man, and so on. I don't mean for this video to sound like I'm trying to tear down the old Mega Man games to build up the X series, since that's not what I'm going for. I'm just trying to highlight the ways in which Mega Man X did not take the new console generation for granted, as we have all these new tropes to talk about with the X series compared to the original. Having said that, in Mega Man X, the artists wanted to try something different. The theme they settled on was a mix between some kind of element and an animal, these all being machine animals. That's how you end up with the final boss roster of Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Armored Armadillo, Launch Octopus, Boomer Kawanger, Sting Chameleon, Storm Eagle, and Flame Mammoth, each one of them displaying the Sigma logo somewhere on their body. Each of these characters has a personality, not something displayed in the game, but something the series delves into more in later games and external media. For these new Mega Man X videos, I decided to pick up the Mega Man X Complete Works book as well as the newly released Maverick Hunter's Field Guide. The former being an art book with quotes from the artists that worked on the games discussing how they approached each title in the Mega Man X series. The latter being a character bible on every single character and thing within the Mega Man X series in alphabetical order, written like a report to the Maverick Hunters. Some of the larger figures in the Mega Man fan community even contributed to it, which I thought was really cool. If you're a fan of the series, I'd say both are an interesting read. I was saying before that this game has more in-game world building than before, and that can be seen on this map. Storm Eagle's flying battleship is strong, but if you beat him, the ship crashes from the sky into Spark Mandrill's power plant. If you played that stage before Storm Eagles, you're met with electric sparks flying towards you that you need to dodge, but if you cause the ship to crash through the ceiling before you come here, the power barely works anymore. This mini-boss at the start of the stage would use the electricity in the building to attack you, but now there isn't any to use. Flame Mammoth's factory has a bed of deadly lava below you at most times, but if you play Chill Penguin first, the ice from the mountain will freeze the factory over, creating a layer of ice that you can safely walk on. The water from Launch Octopus's stage will partially flood Sting Chameleon's forest. Like the opening stage, I get that this is the 1,000,000th Mega Man X analysis, and I'm not blowing anyone's mind here, but this game's next generation appeal via its visuals, its music, its world, and gameplay just always impresses me whenever I replay it. A game that first released 7 years before I was born, and yet its commitment to taking advantage of the SNES's hardware just has my respect. This is backed up by the gameplay, since the game has plenty of substance outside of all that. From a gameplay perspective, this game at default carries over many staples from the classic Mega Man games. You still run forward, shooting enemies with your basic X-Buster shots that can be charged to do more damage. The two most critical aspects of playing a Mega Man platformer are timing your shots with your enemies and timing your jumps to reach the platforms while watching out for stage hazards. All of that is definitely there in Mega Man X, but the game also expands the moveset quite a bit. First with the wall jump I talked about in the intro stage. X can slide down walls, jump up, jump off of, and between them as well. I find this to be a game changer for multiple reasons, but chief among them being that falling into a pit doesn't have to mean you're doomed. You can still save yourself with the right timing. Meaning that my least favorite classic Mega Man trope, where enemies fly out of platforms, is just not a factor in the X series at all. But that's the extent of X's abilities by default. Yeah, one whole paragraph of stuff, but even with just that, this gameplay is very satisfying, as I can discuss when going over the level design in more detail. But that's not where the mechanics of X1 end. The rise of the RPG genre was something the developers noted when making X1 and wanted to incorporate the elements of player growth within the gameplay. I mean, X on the box art of the US release looks like this. I want to look like that, but instead I'm stuck with this. Early in Chill Penguin stage, you'll find a blue capsule containing an AI message from X's creator, Dr. Light. Light has 4 of these capsules hidden across the area that X must find in order to gain additional armor pieces. This first one being the leg parts that allow X to dash along the ground, something that quickly became a Mega Man X, or really, Mega Man series staple. Something Zero was capable of doing earlier as well. With the dash, you can move faster, your shots do more damage while dashing, and the length of your jumps from both the ground and walls is greatly increased. The head parts allow X to bust through blocks with his head, and this one's kind of a dud. Doesn't really present much of a use throughout the game, but it helps with certain items, and it protects you from the crumbling blocks in Sting Chameleon stage. The body parts reduce the damage that X takes by 50%, which is obviously a must-have upgrade. The arm parts are also great, as you can now charge your shots to a 3rd level for increased damage and charge your special weapons. I'm not going to speak with authority on JRPGs as a genre because I've barely played any of them, but I will say this. The thought of turn-based battling has just never really done it for me since I prefer being an active player in combat. Now, these Final Fantasy Pixel remasters makes me want to give them a proper try, but that's neither here nor there. My point is that RPGs have the whole thing with leveling up going on. In Mega Man X, there aren't experience points that lead to a level up, but instead you find these upgrades and they just make you feel more powerful in a material way. The foot, body, and arm parts especially. This is also helped by the special weapons. Defeating each Maverick allows X to copy one of their abilities using his variable weapons system. These are some of the best special weapons in the history of Mega Man. Each and every one of them is useful for something, like this elevator ride in Boomer Kawanger's stage. Shotgun Ice's Ricochet clears these enemies like it's nobody's business. The homing torpedo tracks enemies that are faster, the chameleon sting shoots in 3 directions, while weapons such as rolling shield, storm tornado, and fire wave just obliterate enemies in front of you. And that's not even considering the charged up versions of these weapons where you get full on invincibility with the charged chameleon sting, storm tornado clears enemies above and below you, electric spark sending waves of electricity in both directions. It's a great roster of weapons to use both offensively and when hunting for other items. Yeah, 8 special weapons, 4 armor capsules, and you still aren't done exploring. You might notice that X's health bar at the start is much smaller than the original Mega Man's, and that's because you must collect 8 heart tanks in order to gradually expand X's health bar to be at its full potential. In addition to that, you can find 4 sub-tanks. These refill your health, but they can only be filled up when you pick up HP drops from enemies while at full health yourself. I tend not to need these much in my playthroughs, usually save them for the final boss, but they are handy overall. Finding all these upgrades is a lot of fun because you have to use your different abilities together to grab them all, like using Boomerang Cutter to grab this sub-tank, or using a dash jump to reach this ledge and using Fire Wave on this igloo to get a heart tank. Many of them require you to think outside the box, like if you reach this battleship and launch Octopus's stage, you can blast it until it sinks into the water, revealing a hidden mini-boss that protects a heart tank. Or when you get chased by this mechanaloid, maybe there's something back the way it came, and there you find a sub-tank. It's really rewarding to collect all the upgrades in this game. I remember vividly when I first played this game how powerful I felt when I got the body parts. I challenged the mini-boss guarding it, and while I kicked my ass, when I beat it and I was rewarded with 50% damage reduction, that's when you know the enemies are in trouble now. I also remember this moment in Armored Armadillo's stage where I saw this heart tank up above. You're supposed to beat the mechanaloid before it destroys the wall you need to climb up here. But I swear on my first playthrough I got this heart tank with a well-timed dash jump, although I couldn't recreate the effect here. Someone let me know if my memory is wrong or if this is possible. I think this game is endlessly replayable, as I'm sure you can tell. From the environmental changes and stages to the process of collecting all the upgrades, Mega Man X is a game where no 2 playthroughs need be the same. I'm a player who prefers to collect everything in the Mega Man X games, so my playstyle is geared towards discovering which stage order nets me all the unlockables while revisiting as few stages as possible. It was something that I focused a lot of my attention on in the old days of 2015. I would think up pathways I could take in the game while I was in school and then try to execute them when I got home. Take this part of Storm Eagle's stage, for example. I thought this tank barring entry to the head parts required Fire Wave from Flame Mammoth in order to get through, but I liked playing Storm Eagle first since I liked using Storm Tornado on Flame Mammoth himself. When I first played Mega Man Extreme on the Game Boy Color, I discovered the X-Buster can break through these tanks, and I wondered if the same applied to X1, and it did. A really awesome moment as it eliminated an entire backtrack to a stage. At the end of the game, I would need to revisit Spark Mandrill's stage in order to get the sub-tank with Boomerang Cutter. But what if I went to Boomer Kawanger before Spark Mandrill and got his weapon first, then got the sub-tank? When things like that work, it's a certified gamer moment. But seriously though, a game with 13 stages can leave this much of an impact by providing this much replay value. But honestly, you don't even need to fully complete Mega Man X to have a good time with it. For this video, I decided to run through the game 3 times. The first was my typical least backtracking playthrough, then the second was my recreating the first playthrough, and last was a challenge run where I decided to go through the game with as little upgrades as possible, meaning I saved Chill Penguin and the Dash for last. Mixing it up with each playthrough will definitely be something I keep doing as I come back to this game in the future, since the least backtracking route is just how I've always played it for like the last 6 years. What I've learned now is that challenge runs can add some extra spice to your playthrough. The Minimalist run in particular showed off how well designed the stages are in Mega Man X. I said a basic fundamental of Mega Man is lining up your shots with the enemies to hit them, and stages like Storm Eagle and Boomer Kawanger pull this off really well, as the former sees these platforms rising up and down with the enemies on them where you have to time your shots and your jumps to make it between them. The latter has this large vertical shaft at the end where you have to decide where the best times to scale the walls are versus jumping to the platforms in the center. It's the kind of level design the classic series never really had. All these levels are really fun and challenging to play as the default X without the dash, because X1 is just a super fun game no matter how you choose to play it. The only areas I think this game lacks are 1. The boss design. Now, I think without special weapons, there are a lot of interesting patterns and attacks here, like dodging Spark Mandrill's shots while also not getting hit by his wall punch attack, or Flame Mammoth shooting tar at the ground that will limit your movement. I like fighting Armored Armadillo as he requires a slow approach. You have to dodge all his attacks like bouncing between the walls and shoot when you get the chance, but you should only use the regular pellets because if you charge, he'll absorb the energy with his shield and reflect it back to you. The fight with Launch Octopus appropriately opens with him telling you he's about to kick your ass, as he's easily the hardest boss of the 8 Mavericks to defeat. For the most part, I think he's doable, but the homing torpedoes will do a lot of damage and you'd better hope you're far away from the whirlwind attack because without the dash you're probably going to get sucked in. The bosses aren't the easiest to read in a first playthrough, but I will say I enjoyed fighting all of them on the minimalist run. It provided a challenge the bosses rarely do in this game because of the fact that the special weapons you get serve as the weakness for one of the other bosses. This game being the case study of what's called Spark Mandrill Syndrome, where a Mega Man game has all these well-designed bosses, but if you bring a weakness into the mix, it just turns into this. My stance on this is pretty simple. I just think the weakness making your victory so certain that the boss is just a formality is bad design. Especially when this problem is pretty easy to fix. Just make it so that the weakness does 1 or 2 more units of damage than the charge shot. In the case of someone like Spark Mandrill, the problem would be solved. The other issue I have with the game is the performance. When the action gets intense like the examples on the screen, the game starts chugging. It never hurts the actual gameplay because these are set piece moments, but it is there and something the PS2 collection actually managed to fix. Honestly, those are my 2 big gripes with the game, and the second one's a nitpick at best, so this game is pretty damn good to say the least. Now, this transition seemed a lot better in my mind when I came up with it, but on the note of things outside of the gameplay, how about that soundtrack? I keep saying this game excelled at next generation appeal, and when it comes to music, I think the NES produced a lot of great and iconic tracks, but the SNES has always been the console where I think video game music took a big leap in quality. Just listening to the soundtrack of X1, and you can clearly hear how much effort the composers put in. As in the tracks, you can clearly hear what instruments they're trying to replicate with this fantastic instrumentation. With that, and composition that is simply summed up as an absolute banger, you have my favorite Mega Man soundtrack by far. So with all that said, we've reached the end of the game. The 8 Mavericks are down, and X has grown considerably as a character. All that's left is to meet Zero at Sigma's Fortress. But first, you can go back to Armored Armadillo's stage if you've collected all the heart tanks, sub-tanks, armor pieces, and defeated all 8 Maverick bosses, and find a new secret. If you reach this point in the stage, jump into the pit, load the checkpoint, and repeat the process about 4 more times, and you'll find a secret capsule from Dr. Light where he teaches you the Hadouken from Capcom's other franchise, Street Fighter. This secret move destroys any boss fight it comes into contact with in 1 hit. The only catch being that you need to be at full health to use it. In more recent playthroughs, I've been prone to just skip past this one because it takes like 5 minutes to get the Hadouken when I could just get on with the game. But whether you get it or not, the next level is Sigma Palace 1, where the designers are able to take advantage of moves you're guaranteed to have by this point, like the dash boots in the opening platforming segment. Then there's a bit of story as Vile returns from the opening and you still can't beat him, but that's when Zero decides to sacrifice himself to destroy Vile's right armor, allowing X to finally defeat Vile. Another really satisfying moment as we saw Zero save our asses at the beginning, and now he sacrificed himself so you can go on and defeat Sigma as you have become more powerful than him like you said you could at the beginning. As far as story and context are concerned, it would be easy to say Mega Man X1 doesn't have enough story since the game never properly establishes the backstory in-game, but I think for a 16-bit platformer from 1993 that was trying to have a little more plot, they struck a pretty good balance. You know you want to beat Vile because of what happened in the intro, you know Zero's on your side as well. Zero says he'll find Sigma and meet up with us later, Sigma obviously being the main villain of the game. It's satisfying to beat Sigma's forces, and then what we just saw was also a great bit of storytelling and gameplay. I think X1 does all it needed to do to leave an impact without bombarding the player with unneeded dialogue like later X games that feel the need to do. If you reached Zero's death without the arm cannon upgrade, Zero will just give you his. No material difference between the one from Dr. Light and the one from Zero, so it doesn't really matter. Now you have all the tools you need to complete the game, as a couple of segments in Sigma Palace 1, 2, and 3 are made much simpler with the use of charged special weapons. The most memorable part about the Sigma Palace stages to me would be, first, the feeling of getting deeper and deeper into enemy territory with each stage. Or rather, higher and higher given the nature of Sigma's HQ. The first 3 stages also have fantastic music as well. Special highlight to stage 2, one of the catchiest and most climactic tracks in the game. My favorite part about these stages would be how they handle the boss rush segment. Almost every Mega Man game has this part at the end where you have to fight all main bosses all over again. If you've followed me for a long time, you'd know I've never been super fond of these segments, but in X1 they pace it out throughout the first 3 Sigma Palace stages, breaking up the monotony with platforming and combat. Also, if you do have the Hadouken, there's a suspenseful feeling that comes from the refights beginning as you hope you'll be able to one-shot them. For those reasons, I think this game makes the refights pretty inoffensive. Stage 4 is where the final battle with Sigma takes place. Another smart design choice right from the start. This stage doesn't waste any time, it's just one climb up a shaft and you're in the boss fight. But these little openings house infinitely respawning enemies that allow you to refill your health and weapon ammo right at the start of the stage if you die. It's baffling that more X games don't do this. The first battle against Sigma's guard dog and Sigma himself are both dealt with pretty easily if you use their weaknesses, Shotgun Ice and Electric Spark respectively, as Sigma then transforms into his final form. This being the hardest boss in the game as he hits pretty hard, has attacks all over the screen and doesn't take much damage. However, I feel that the attacks here are very readable, meaning that if you aren't experienced with the game, you'll definitely beat it with enough time and practice, and when you do, you can take pride in stopping Sigma's rebellion once and for all. The game ends on a shot of X reflecting on the fact that this war has cost a lot of Reploid lives, many of which cannot be brought back, and that he hopes one day the fighting will stop. However, if Mavericks ever return, X will always be there to stop it. I've always enjoyed this rather melancholic ending. Mega Man games have had those before, so it's nothing new for this series, but still, you just saved the day and our hero takes a moment to recognize all that's happened to get to this point, showing that he's a bit of a pacifist by nature, but will continue to fight. The fact that X is the kind of character that never wants to fight but does it anyway because it's right is something that always made him more interesting to me than the original Mega Man. And that's all in the first game, Mega Man X. One of the best games I've ever played. Like I said, it's a game from 1993, but each and every playthrough I managed to appreciate it even more since it's just so well made and revolutionary for its time and for its series. The gameplay established in Mega Man X served as the bedrock of the Mega Man franchise going forward, and that's something that can never be taken away from this simply incredible game. Many moons ago, I said Mega Man 03 was the best Mega Man game, and it's certainly a damn good one, but now my 4 favorite games in the Mega Man series can only be X1 through X4, with X1 ranking at the top because it's a game I can go back to and guarantee I'll have a good time with. What more reason do I need to say that Mega Man X is one of my favorite games of all time? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask so that I may answer the question. This game, in hindsight, is pretty important to me on a personal level. In a previous video, I went over the story of my first playthrough that happened in January of 2015, which was almost 7 years ago now, so I won't waste too much time on it. But the gist of it was that I got the game on Wii U, got my ass kicked on the first couple levels I played, but when I finally managed to beat a stage and heard the victory theme, I was ecstatic. I was a big fan of the Completionist back then and had no idea that his intro music was the victory jingle from this game. Whenever I hear it, a wave of memories rushes through me, from that Completionist angle to the feeling of getting stronger with each boss fight beaten. That first playthrough of X1 is something I won't forget anytime soon. But the memory I really wanted to reflect on today, October 5th, 2021, is just the original review of Mega Man X1 I uploaded 5 years ago today. I remember that time so well. I was almost 1 full year into the YouTube thing with about 146 subscribers to my name. 2 months prior, I had uploaded the Sly 4 review, and while that video ended with me being optimistic about the future of my channel, I was honestly not sure where I wanted to take it next and bounced between a couple of ideas after that. When my friend RZ was doing his videos on Mega Man X4 and X5, and this gave me the bit of inspiration to do my own X videos, and thus, the all-inclusive Mega Man X Retrospective was born. 5 years later, I can't believe that this was the project that put me on the path I'm on now. I was in 10th grade back then, over a month away from turning 16, just making videos because it's something I always wanted to do. I remember school getting out that day and checking the views on my phone. I saw I got 31 views in one day. How legendary is that? Stuff like that's a lot of fun to look back on and see how far you've come. As the X videos would progressively do better than the one previous, leading to X6, which I'm sure you know, really blew up, allowing my channel to reach 3,000 subscribers before my 10th grade year was even over, when I had like 100 going into it. Now, 5 years later, I have roughly 100k. For that, I thank everyone who keeps watching me, even in spite of my constantly changing my opinions and all the other goofy things about me. But really, I owe a lot to the Mega Man X series, and the fate of this channel is one of the leading reasons why. Unlike Ratchet, I'm not here doing X1 through X4 again because I hate the old videos that much and want to tear those videos down. I have a lot of issues with those videos that I can get into in the X2 video, but I'm not here for that reason. I'm here to celebrate the 5th anniversary of a project that clearly bore a lot of fruit for me in the long term, because I love these games and I hope I made that clear this time. But that's all I have to say on Mega Man X. Next time I'll be doing Mega Man X2, and I have a lot of great things to say about that game as well. So I hope you look forward to it. In the meantime, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. This video is brought to you by all the people who support me on Patreon. Like mentioned earlier in the video, the Tier 2 patrons get their names shown on the screen right now, while the Tier 3 patrons get their names said out loud, those being Caleb Escobar, Chris Delgado, Hazel Zero, RN the Atom, Perigre, the Squeaker Nerd, Protector of Memes, Daxter A. Valancourt, Jepson 2.0, Kaiko Blur, Kyler Lehman, Bo Block, Zero Scarlet, Joe, Michael Caboose, your boy Joe, Avatar Aiden YT, Icarus 10032, and the G Wizard. Thanks to all those who back me on Patreon. Like I said, Mega Man X2 is the next video, and I hope you all join me for that. Take care.